Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to Molten Modular. Today we're looking at the Erica Synths Black VCO and the Black VCO Expander. The Black VCO is an analog oscillator based upon the core of the old Soviet Polivoks synthesizer, which was renowned for its vigor and spit. Erica Synths have re-engineered it to make it more stable, fatter, wider, fuller, thicker, and ultimately more dark, because Erica Synths are all about the darkness. I'm wearing my darkest shirt in order to reflect Erica Synths' darkness. They have a soft spot for the Polivoks because it was the first sort of module that they ever put together, and I guess being based in Latvia, they probably have unique access to some of that old Soviet technology. And although the Polivoks probably lacks a bit of finesse and elegance, it more than makes up for it in kind of balls and aggression. Although it's probably the filter that's the defining factor of the Polivoks, and I have Polivoks filter here. But the oscillator does have its own unique character, a distinct flavour, and it's that sort of character that Erica Synths have attempted to capture and pour into the Black VCO. Now, Black VCO is not a great name. They have a lot of stuff that's called Black this, that and the other. They have a lot of modules, and something as awesome and distinct as the Black VCO really needs a better name. It needs something meaty, something that feels nice in the mouth, like spatula or crinkle bang or thunder bottom. I don't know, it's something that describes its essence, because Black VCO, no, it doesn't really conjure up any images of anything at all, whereas the core of this oscillator is this throbbing heart of gristly muscle, and that is so not reflected in the name. And perhaps that's one of the reasons why it seems to have floated a little bit under the radar, because in my research into the Black VCO I found very few videos, very few people actually talking about it, and I wonder whether it's because the name is just that little bit nondescript, and so it's not something that you're instantly aware of. Oh wow, there's a new black module from Erica Synths. Really? They're all black modules. But hopefully I can do something about that. Hopefully I can demonstrate to you why this is a phenomenal oscillator. With a little bit of tweaking and fiddling with my feeble skills, I should give you just an inkling of what's possible with this oscillator and why it might be worth your time, or more importantly, your cash. So let me take you through the Black VCO as I pull out some of its awesomeness and take you perhaps from this to something maybe like this. And I'm sure I'll be able to make a whole load of noises in between. To start with, we're going to focus purely on the Black VCO. We're going to ignore the expander for now, we'll look at that later, and focus purely on the oscillator. Now, if this is the first time you've watched a video about an oscillator, then I recommend checking out my video, Discovering Oscillators, which will give you a really good grounding in what oscillators are all about and what the heck you use them for. And in that video, you'll be introduced to the Make Noise STO, which is a fabulous little oscillator. But once you've watched that, come back and watch this, because the Black VCO is very different. And although they're great companions in a rack, it's really interesting to contrast and compare what they offer as oscillators. The Make Noise STO is really all about the sweetness, whereas the Black VCO is not about sweetness at all. It's about edge and fizz and blood and guts and glory and the pumping life and throbbing organs of treacly fluid, or something like that. So the original Polivoks had 5 waveforms. It had a triangle, a sawtooth, and 3 different pulses. The Black VCO also has 5 waveforms, but it has sine, triangle, sawtooth, pulse with pulse width modulation, and a sub-output. Let's have a listen. I'm just plugging directly into my Veils here, my voltage controlled amplifier, which is going through the scope and then out to the output. And in there, hopefully you can see a nice sine wave. That's what it is. Now, the tuning of this oscillator is done on this big fat knob here, the tuning knob. Now, this takes us down and up a couple of octaves. And then you've got an octave step switch. Take it all the way up and all the way down. Triangle. It's like the sine but has a little bit more edge to it, and this is the waveform from the Polivoks. So is a sawtooth. Pulse with pulse width modulation. And then a sub. Now the sub's quite interesting because I spent a lot of time working on the sub oscillator. A sub is just another waveform that's set an octave below the rest of the pitch. So you've got your pulse, you've got your sub. Yeah? But usually in oscillators, the sub is just a pulse. It's a square wave set an octave below. With this one, they've created something slightly different. So the sub actually has a character of its own. So you can see in the scope, it has a ramp to it, it has an edge to it, and that gives it a different flavour, so that when these waveforms start coming together, it's not just sort of filling in the bottom end, it's actually adding more harmonics, adding more stuff to the overall sonic palette. And that's very cool. So there you are, a bunch of nice waveforms. So what happens next? Well, what you can start to do is to blend these together to form new and more interesting waveforms. Because what's interesting with Eurorack and what's interesting with Eurorack oscillators is that all of those waveforms are available all the time. If you're coming to this from a synthesizer background, you're going to be used to selecting waveforms on a knob. Oh, I'm going to want to use a triangle. Oh, I want to use a square wave. And that is generally how synthesizers work. But in Eurorack, all of these are working all the time. So signal is pouring out of these outputs here all over the desk the whole time. They're always on, always there. You're not switching between them. They are always accessible. And that means that we can mix them together. We can blend them and form completely new waveforms. So we plug in the sine, triangle, sawtooth, pulse, and then look, I've run out of channels in my VCA. But what I can now do is adjust the volume of each of these waves to achieve completely different waveforms. Awesome, yeah, I know. So now I've got a whole different choice of waveforms to play with. And to play, I mean make music with, because that's what we're here for. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send it a bit of a sequence so that we can hear that in action. For sequencing, I'm going to be using my Varigate 4 Plus here, which is from Moleco Heavy Industries and is very new to me. So I don't yet fully understand exactly what it's doing, but my grasp of it so far is that channel 1, I can set up a bunch of control voltages which I can send to the oscillator, which will play a tune. Now, I wanted to point out at this point that pitch is only ever present within the oscillator. This is not MIDI. This is not MIDI where you're sending pitch information to a device which then plays it. You're sending control voltages. Now what happens is you take the control voltages and plug it into the 1 volt per octave input on the oscillator. 1 volt per octave. That's the Eurorack standard for pitch change. So if I send it 1 volt, it will play whatever note is set here. Then if I send it 2 volts, it will jump up an octave. And of course everything in between. So the pitch is a factor of this. The pitch is set by the oscillator, not by the sequencer. I'm not sending it C3 or C5 or A2. I'm just sending it a control voltage, and that pitch depends upon the pitch set in the oscillator. Does that make sense? It doesn't really matter. You just plug it from here into there, and it plays a tune. That's great, but we haven't even got to the cool bit yet. The cool bit is that because these are all independent, because all of these waveforms are playing all the time, and I have now got them into my VCA independently, I can treat them independently. So not just blend them in terms of volume, but I can route these signals through different things differently. Now, the oscillator itself is a monophonic oscillator. It can only respond to one bunch of control voltages. It has a single 1 volt per octave input, and all of the waveforms are playing the same tune. They're all playing the same tune. They're all playing together. I can't play chords. I can't treat them separately in terms of pitch. However, I can treat the signals differently. So I can apply envelopes, I can route through filters, and all sorts of stuff like that to create a more complex, interesting, and evolving sound. Why don't I do a bit of that? Okay, I will. So I'm going to leave the sine wave just playing the tune. Now I'm going to apply an envelope to the triangle in order to give it a bit more of an accent, I suppose, because the triangle and the sine sound very similar. So I'm just going to make the triangle one pop every now and again. To do that, I'm going to trigger an envelope from channel 2. Channel 2 on the variegate just sends out gates, so it just triggers stuff. And you don't have to have it trigger on every note, you have it trigger on every other note, every 4th note, every 8th note, whatever you like. So I'm going to take channel 2 here and plug that in to trigger the maths over here. And then take the output of the maths to envelope the triangle. Now I learned something new about the maths. DivKid got in touch and said, if you use output 4 rather than the sum output, then you can use this knob here to control the level of the envelope. He doesn't talk like that, but that's very useful. So I put in number 4 there and apply that to my VCA. I have a bit more control over the level of that envelope. So let's turn the sine down. So that's got a nice little sort of bump going along. Let's bring the sine wave in and mix the two together. That's quite nice. Right, for the sawtooth, I'm going to stick that through a filter. I'm going to stick that through this filter over here. And for the pulse, I'm going to stick that through my Polivoks filter over here. Now I don't want to make a fuss about the Polivoks filter in particular, so I want to focus on the oscillator, but it is here, I've got to use it. That's pretty nice. That's pretty simple. I mean, it's a very simple patch, and already I'm getting a lot more than just a beep out of this oscillator. I'm getting some real grit down at the bottom end, some fizz in the middle, some really nice accents on top, and I haven't even plugged in the sub. I mean, this is the thing. I don't have another VCA. I don't have another input. I've only got the 4 because, you know, being an idiot and new to Eurorack, I thought 4 VCAs. I need one for every oscillator. So I need one for that oscillator, one for that oscillator, one for that oscillator, and a spare. Beautiful. I've got this sorted. No, no, no. The Black VCO has 5 outputs, all of which can be treated independently. So I need 5 VCAs, at least. My Make Noise thing over here has got 3 outputs, so that's 8. My wavetable one has got another output or 2 here, that's 10. I need at least 10 VCAs. And I haven't even talked about the expander yet, which has got another 3 outputs. That's 13. So kind of you need a whole rack of VCAs. So when people say to you in conversations on your rack forums and such like, that you always need more VCAs, they know what they're talking about. You do, and you will not get that. When you start out, you'll be going, well, I don't, more VCAs? I mean, I just put a signal through there, and then I apply an envelope. I mean, that's what a VCA is about. You know, it's a bit, yeah, whatever. But no, you use VCAs for a lot more than that to start with, but also what you fail to understand when you're starting out is how many outputs on your oscillator you have and that you can use. And for that, you need VCAs. So what am I going to do with my sub then? Well, instead, I will plug it in all the way over here into my Rosie, because I have an extra input on my output module over here, my Rosie output, which allows me to mix between the two. So I'm just going to plug this in over here. Now, can I do a bit more with this? Yeah, I can do a bit more with this. Let's do some more of this. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take the clock out from a variegate, plug it into our old friend, the Turing machine. That's now going to kick out, with a bit of luck, a bit of a random sequence. So we can take that sequence and plug it into our filter. That's nice. That's very nice. I could use a bit more enveloping. I could take, for instance, the pulse output of the Turing machine, stick that into trigger the other mass envelope, and plug that into the sawtooth. Now, if I just take these down a second. Then maybe we could apply an LFO to it. I'm going to do it via a trim knob so that it's not too severe. I can also add in a little bit of pulse width modulation. Take that out and plug it into pulse width modulation input here. Is that enough flavour for you? I think that's sounding pretty meaty. So all of that sound, that entire thing, is coming purely from the Black VCO, coming purely from a monophonic, simple, analog oscillator. It just blows my mind. It blows my mind every time. Every time I sit down and spend time with an oscillator like this, and I've spent a lot of time with this Black VCO now, and I am just thoroughly in love with it. It just demonstrates to me, the essence of Eurorack, that versatility. In a synthesizer, you're stuck with whatever the manufacturer wants to give you. Whatever signal routing it is, whatever path those signals follow, it's all there and defined for you. With here, it's not. It just pours out of the module, and what you do with it is entirely up to you. You route it through filters, through other things, through effects processing, through envelopes, through whatever you want. Take it away, mix it back together, blend, don't blend, use them independently, don't put that over here, use that to modulate something else. It's that extraordinary opening out of synthesis that I absolutely adore about Eurorack. I mean, when I was starting off, I had no idea. I had no idea of this flexibility. I had, an inkling, a hint, but there's no way anyone could have explained to me exactly how extraordinary the experience is playing with Eurorack. You just have to do it. You can't learn it. You can't witness it. You have to be doing it yourself. I believe you have to get in there and do it yourself, and only then does your mind go, whoop, I get it. I get it, and I get why I need a case 5 times the size, because I'm running out of things to do. I've only got a couple of filters and an envelope or two. That's it. And yet I'm producing something quite extraordinary. It's just amazing. From one oscillator. I've got other oscillators. I could be making an enormous cacophony, and I probably will at some point. But for the moment, I'm just focusing on the Black VCO. Let's just quickly look at that in a slightly more traditional frame. I've got a keyboard over here which has a CV output, this little fella here, for which I've found no use really other than having its CV output. And I'm going to take the output from the sequencer and plug that in here and play it from the keyboard instead. Just for fun. Because that's what you do. You have fun. If I can find the cable, let's jam it in there. Oh, that's nice. Because all the gates and stuff are still firing, I'm not using this as a gate, I'm purely using it to change pitch. So let's have a go at that. Oh. I mean, that's just excellent. I mean, I created that myself. I patched it together myself. It wasn't a preset. I didn't dial up a preset and play it. No, I flipping created my own synthesizer sound and then played it from a keyboard. Wow. Well, it's wow for someone like me who finds this stuff ultimately fascinating. Right, what's next? Well, it has another input or two. One of them is called FM. Now, as we know, FM can be two things. It can be the slight wobble that you get with vibrato. That's frequency modulation. Oh yes it is. And the other one is the sort of mad, crazy form of oscillators bashing together and forming new waveforms and new tones and new timbres. I mean, obviously championed in Yamaha's DX7 and those sort of FM synths which use a lot of operators and modulators in order to form very interesting and precise sounds. That's not really what FM is about in Eurorack. FM is very much about crashing two oscillators together and kind of seeing what occurs. So I have a nice oscillator here, the STO. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to jam it in to my FM input over here on the Black VCO. Nothing much happens. So I haven't turned up the FM yet. Let's give that a go. There you go. FM, that is. Now, generally speaking, it's probably easier to work with FM with just a sine wave. That tends to produce the most familiar results. See, that's really lovely. And you can probably see in the scope down here the sort of waveforms it's producing. I mean, I'm sure there's probably some kind of, some kind of method to producing decent sounds in FM, but that's not for me. I just kind of fiddle until you find something interesting. And you've got two parameters to play with. You've got the pitch of the feeding oscillator, of the modulator if you like, and you've got the level of FM here. And of course, there's all sorts of things you can do to the modulator. For instance, I can take another sine wave, plug it into 1 volt per octave. Ah, now you're talking, now we're opening up the box of crazy. Or do it with a square wave. Or perhaps we could use the output of the Turing machine, stuff that into it. yes, that's FM then. That's sort of interesting and crazy. It's possible to create all sorts of tones and timbres out of that relationship between this oscillator and that oscillator. This is actually another reason why I mentioned how they make great companions, because they do feed into each other really well, the STO and the black VCO. But any oscillator will do. In fact, you can even do it with an LFO to some degree, although you need to get up to really high frequencies to affect those kind of bell and tingly sounds. Final input on the black VCO is the sync input. Now this is all about taking an oscillator again, just like you did with FM, and stuffing it into the black VCO in order to re-trigger the cycle of its oscillator. So if you have a different frequency from here going into here, it'll restart the cycle before it gets to the end, and so create new and interesting waveforms. It has this hard sync feel. Let's plug something in and see what I mean. Other than sounding a little bit like Beastie Boys' Intergalactic, the sound is, I guess it's that hard sync sound. The pitch of the STO seems to be sort of taking over the pitch of the VCO. You know, I'm not really entirely sure exactly what you do with sync or how it works, except that you plug it in and it creates new waveforms. And ultimately that's what we're after, is more and more waveforms to play with. But again, if I take a square wave into its input over here, let's see what happens. That's sine wave. It's also possible to use a less pure wave, adds its own flavour to it. So I'm now changing this sort of sine wave into a more triangular wave on the STO. That seems to have an effect. I don't know. So if you're the sort of person who knows what sync is all about, tell me all about it in the comments below. That's always helpful. So that, in essence, I think, is the black VCO. At least that's what I've been getting out of it so far. It's immensely warm. It has the sort of sound that just wants to reach out and sort of grab your heart and slowly squeeze it until treacle starts oozing out. It has this rumph to it, which I really, really like. And definitely you can hear that sub bass in there. It's not just filling out the bottom end. It's really giving a flavour all of its own. And that for me is something that kind of sets it apart from my experience with, for instance, the STO. It has this life to it down in the bottom end. It has almost like a sense of consciousness, a growth, a way that it's kind of permeating the music and the waveforms and the sound as it comes out. Well, something like that. Anyway, it's just brilliant. Thoroughly enjoyed routing that through everything. I need more stuff. I need more modules so I can do more with it. Or, if I want to do more with it, I could get the expander. The black VCO expander then. It expands on the black VCO. It's here somewhere. I'm going to have to get back to 0. Ah! This is always my favourite bit. The black VCO expander then. Here it is. There's a little expander module for the black VCO. It plugs in the back and takes over some of the wave mixing duties and other interesting things. At a simple level, it's a waveform mixer. Now, I've just done a whole bunch of waveform mixing in my VCA. So what's the point of the expander if I can do it all in my VCA? Well, it does do the same thing largely, but first of all, it stops me having to use the entirety of my VCA in order to do that blending and to hear it. But it does more than that. It also offers an inverted version of the wave, and it adds another sub-level of bass. So you've got a 2-octave sub, and that just takes it to a whole other level of things. So let's have a poke around. Now, one thing, first of all, I absolutely love about the expander is that it has a mix output. Now, I know this is kind of contrary to what I was saying about how awesome it has to have individual outputs. It is awesome to have individual outputs of waveforms, but it's also awesome to have a mix output because it saves you all this fiddling about with VCAs and just gives you a really interesting and complex waveform output. And that can be very handy if you don't want to do the whole routing and patching of individual outputs to individual things. It's very, very handy. I think every oscillator should have one. So every oscillator really needs a little expander unit with a mix output. That would be helpful to me. I don't know if it would be helpful to anybody else. But anyway, this is what it has. So out of here, you get everything. Let's plug it in. Now, if I adjust these a little bit, I'll see if I can find the zero. It's actually quite hard to find. It's quite hard to put all of these to zero so that you can't hear anything through the mix output. But then why would we not want to hear something through the mix output? We're supposed to be creating waveforms. Last thing we need at this time is silence. So I don't think that's a major flaw. But as you can hear, I can't quite get nothing. Oh, almost. So what you have is 3 knobs that control the blend of waveforms. The first one here is for the sine and triangle, sort of combined. Because they're so similar, they've decided to stick a switch in so you can switch between sine and triangle. So there's sine, switch down here, there's triangle. Easy. Now, for reasons unknown, they've also introduced another waveform that's separate from all the rest, and it's this one. They call it the tits. I guess because it looks like a pair of boobs. I mean, I guess that's what they're going for. I mean, to me, it perhaps looks more like an arse. I guess it depends on your perspective. So there's your sine, there's your tits, there's your triangle. I'll try not to laugh every time I say it, okay? So you have a blend of that on this knob. This second knob gives you the saw level. Now with this one, it's very easy to see when you go into the negative version, it then turns itself upside down. And this third one controls the level of the pulse. So now I can use these 3 knobs to create that blend of waveforms that I was doing with my VCA. It's interesting how tits mode introduces that harmonic. Did you hear that? So from there to there. Yeah, nice. I mean, it's so much easier blending on here than it is blending on the VCA. I mean, because you seem to have much better control and you've got a lot more wave shapes and waveforms that are being generated because of the negativity, because of the inverted version as well. So you have a lot more options. It suddenly opens it up from something which was more or less infinite to more infinite, although you're only mixing 3 as opposed to 4 this time. Does that make a difference? I don't know. But the other factor is the sub. Now, if I put all these to 0 again, you've got a sub level here. And within that, I've got the 1-octave sub, and I've got a 2-octave sub. Oh! And a mix between the 2, so I can set that wherever I like. I mean, that's just lovely. Absolutely lovely. This here they call sub-color, which is essentially a low-pass filter. So for something kind of more mystical and rounded, all the way through to the full grit. I mean, that's so nice. Then you can start bringing in those other bits. But what it needs is a tune. And of course, what I could do is just stick that whole lot through a nice fat filter. Do I have a nice fat filter? Yeah, I think I do. But let's not do that. Let's keep things simple. Let's put this back through here. Because what you also have is two additional outputs on the expander. A sub mix out. Now that's not a sub mix, that's not an auxiliary mix. It's a mix of the subs. So we take that and we can plug that back into our VCA. We're now overwhelming it in the bottom end. And then you've got this second octave sub output. So the sub that's beneath the bottom, you can stick that in all by yourself. So that's the mix. That's the sub mix of the two subs. And then that's the bottom sub. So you can blend that with that, with that, to create the most awesome sub mix ever. Now you can, if you like, cut the two subs out of this mix output here on this little knob here. So that'll take back those subs so that you could then treat those independently. But now what I have is I've got a mix output, two sub outputs going through my VCA, which are ripe for individual processing. Should we do that? Why don't we make the lower sub only happen every now and again? So let's take my clock back out to my Turing machine, get something going on that. I'm going to take an output from channel 2, which is sending out gates, and plug that into the maths over here. Then going to use that output on the number 2 sub. The mix I'm going to take through our filter, because that's always just fun. And I'm going to give it a sweep this time. take that main bit, stick that through my other filter. And I'm going to plug in the output of the Turing into the CV input on that. Now, of course, I'm just using these three outputs at the moment, so I'm creating a little bit of treacly feel in the bottom end, which is great, and I've got this mix of stuff going on, and that's immensely pleasing. But I've still got all these outputs here. Now, sadly, my system is not big enough to accommodate all of these things, but I could probably improvise something. For instance, I could stick a sine wave into my Demora, take that out, plug it in over here. Yeah. Then if I take perhaps a pulse output from here, I can plug that in here, and maybe I'll get that doing something else. Maybe I'll take the pulse directly in there. And while I'm at it, I'll give it a little bit of pulse width modulation. could do this all day. the Black VCO then. There you go, I pulled some sounds out, I made some noise, I created a patch, and hopefully to give you just that little inkling, that hint of what's possible with that Black VCO. It's an awesome thing. I have absolutely loved playing with this for the last few weeks. And this last week I've tried and tried to shoot this video, and every time something technical, not with this, but with my other gear, has gone wrong and prevented me from doing it. But what it has enabled me to do is to spend intense hours with this thing, and it's just amazing. It keeps on giving. It keeps on giving back. Every time I sit here and patch something up, it's different. It's weird and wonderful, and it's fat, and it's just dripping. The sound is just dripping off this thing, and it keeps saying, well, no, plug this in. Well, no, plug this in. No, try this. Try that. Blend that. And all the time it's got this stickiness to it, this treacle, this warmth, this ooze. The way that it just creates this sound. Oh, it's just extraordinary. I'm loving every bit of it. These 5 outputs on a Black VCO give you so much versatility. You can throw it all over the place and create all sorts of interesting sounds. The expander just brings this additional layer of kind of like, I don't know, flavour and seasoning and spice to your already bubbling away hot pot of Modular. It's great. I wouldn't be without it. I mean, because it gives you access to those really low notes, and that sub bass, that newly engineered sub bass from Erica Synths is just lovely, because it has this essence, it has this bite to it and this fatness to it that you don't get from a normal pulse, because it's different. It sits there differently, and you're far more aware of it than you are on a regular sub on a regular oscillator. And that, I think, really pushes this up as being something quite special. If I could pull one criticism out of this whole experience, it's simply that it needs a better name. That's not much of a criticism, really. Everything else just works as said. Oh, well, perhaps a little bit more CV control over the expander. That might be nice. I'd like to control this little filter here. Would be nice to get that. It would be nice to get some CV control over the sub mix, over the levels between the -2 and the -1 octave subs. That would be interesting, as well as perhaps getting some control over the individual wave blending. Yeah, but you're talking about an expander part 2 with a whole load of sockets in it. Maybe, but that would, make it a whole other thing all over again. But as far as it is, as far as these two plug together and they work together, that you just need more VCA so that you can experience all of the outputs all at once, all of the signal routing, and really get to grips with what this fella can do. So there you go. I think that's probably enough. You'll find sort of fuller versions of my patches and sort of longer segments on the YouTube channel, so go and check those out. I'll also try to work up a couple of extra patches and other bits and pieces that focus this directly on here without me talking about it. Just make some music. I'll try and stick a couple of videos of that up on the YouTube channel as well. But otherwise, I hope that's enough. I hope that's enough for you. I hope that you can see what's possible in that. I really hope I've shown it in its best light possible, because it's a fabulous piece of kit. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, then please subscribe, like, share it amongst your friends, or if you're feeling really daring, you could pop over to patreon.com and throw me a couple of dollars. It'll enable me to create even more videos about this sort of stuff. That would be amazing. But otherwise, coming soon, I'm going to be looking much deeper at the Varigate 4 Plus, which I'm already enjoying a great deal. So I'll hopefully do a review video on that. And also I want to do something on filters as well, as kind of the next stage of discovering things about Eurorack. And if you want to learn more about my journey into Eurorack, then do check out the channel, because I have a ton of videos on there that just take you through step by step of every stage of Eurorackness, of how I got into it, and I'm using kind of my journey in order to share what I've learned about this phenomenal form of synthesis. So that'll have to do, I think. And in the meantime, go and make some tunes.